All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video if you are on a smaller screen, like a mobile device. If you're on a larger screen, like a desktop computer, it's going to be to the right of the video. So let me scroll down here. Excuse me. See who we'll be starting with today. Oop. Well, my mouse just ran out of battery suddenly, so I'll be doing this a different way. I will be right back. Actually, I'll just go change these out real quick. So I'll be right back. Sorry for the delay, everybody. All right, sorry for the delay, everybody. My mouse decided to crap out on me right when we get started. I think we're good to go now. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So like I said, go ahead and get your questions in there. And let's see here. So I'll be starting here with Keith R. So Keith R says, I'm having trouble scoring consistently. One day I shoot 66. The next time I shoot 83. Any suggestions? That is completely normal. That's just golf. There's something that's called the 20 stroke rule. So basically what that means is that in any given season, there's going to typically be about 20 shots between your best round and your worst round. If you look at, go look at about any PGA Tour player, right? You can look at their best round of the year is usually going to be somewhere in the low 60s, and their worst round of the year is going to be probably around 80, 80, 81, 82. Dustin Johnson, a couple of years ago, he shot like back-to-back 80s in, I don't remember what tournament, might have been the Memorial or something like that. And then in the next tournament, he shot like another 80, and then he withdrew from the tournament, and then he came back and won the Masters after that. He won I think it was the Northern Trust, like before going into the Masters. That was when the Masters was in November that year. So, that's just golf. You're not going to shoot the same score every single time. It's just that's the way it is. So I don't have any suggestions for you. I think it's just it's more just that's what you should expect. If you expect to shoot your handicap or better every time, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So just understand that there's just so many variables. When it comes to golf, we might sleep on the wrong side of the bed, or it's windy, it's harder conditions. The pins are really hard one day, really easy another day. You may lose a lot of shots to the right one day, and that's a bad place to be on some holes. There's so many variables going on. That's why it's such a addicting game, right? Because we're because there's just so much to it. It's one of the most, it's a very simple game for the most part, but it's extremely complicated in the fact that there's just so much to it, right? So yeah, it's completely normal to shoot 76 one day, 83 the next. That's not that wouldn't be something I'd be concerned about. So Thomas says, Q, does the divot board indicate when you flip even a little? No, it's not really going to indicate if you flip. The only way to really know if you flip or not is to see on video, or if you have like a launch monitor of some sort, you can usually see, if it gives you dynamic loft, what dynamic loft is, that's the loft that you present to the ball at impact. So this is a 56-degree wedge. If I have this club straight up and down, that's going to be 56 degrees of loft, right? If I lean the shaft forward, right, that's going to de-loft it, right? If I'm coming in and I'm flipping and I have the shaft straight up and down, I'm going to have some higher dynamic loft numbers. So if you had something to tell you dynamic loft, it would tell you if you're flipping, but the easiest way to tell is just to look at the release of the club on video. But what the divot board gives you feedback on is where you're hitting the ground in relationship to the ball, right? So I have a divot board right here. So I just have a divot on here just as an example. So basically, if you're not familiar with what the divot board is, this is, it's a fairly newer training aid, but it's definitely one of my favorites, if not my favorite. I just think that anybody can benefit from having one of these. But basically, you put that ball on that dot right there, and then when you hit, it will show you where you hit the ground in relationship to the ball, right? So it's going to tell you a couple things. One, it's like what I said, it's going to tell you where you hit the ground in relation to the ball. When you're hitting off of a mat, you can hit 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 or 5 inches behind the golf ball, and you may not even realize it, right? But if you go and do that same thing, you hit off of turf, real turf, that club's digging into the turf, and you're going to hit a chunk, right? Whereas with this, you may hit a ball and it feels great, right? It feels great, but then you look down, you see, oh man, I hit the ground way back here before the ball. Well, that on the course that would have been a chunk shot, right? So ideally, we want to get that dot starting, or that divot starting, in that dot somewhere is going to be a good place usually. If you hit a hair before the dot, that's okay too. But usually right in the dot is going to be a really, really good place to be. The other thing that's going to tell you is the centerness of your strike, right? So if that divot, let's say that divot was shifted toward me, as a right-handed golfer, that's going to be more of a toe strike, right? So if I come in, if I have the ball sitting right in the middle of that dot, and I come in and I hit it off of the toe, right? You're going to see the divot board's going to tell me that. And the same thing, if I hit it off the heel, the divot board's going to tell me that too, right? So it's based on where that is. The other thing that it can tell you is the path, right? So if I'm swinging over the top, right? If I'm swinging this club over the top, my divot may look something like this, right? Where it's going to the left. It's kind of coming over the top and to the left. If I'm swinging too much into out, so I have it like this, and I swing too much into out, it's gonna be out to the right like that. So, but it's not going to tell you if you're flipping or not, but it does give you feedback on basically the 3 most important things to hitting the ball well: making ball first contact, hitting the ball in the center of the face, and the path of the club. The other most important thing is the face angle, but the divot board isn't going to tell you that. But what is going to tell you that is the direction your ball starts, right? Because the ball is going to start mostly in the direction that the club face is pointing at impact. So if the ball's starting to the right, if it's starting to the left, that you have the face open or closed, right? So it's going to give you a good. Now it's not all of the face, but it's mostly. So you're going to be able, just based on having this board and the feedback it gives you and seeing where the ball starts, it's going to tell you the 4 most important things to being able to hit the ball solid. So, or be able to hit the ball, consistently. If you want to pick up a divot board, I'll put the link where you can get one in the chat window here. So let me. It's actually, and if you follow this link, you'll get a video where Clay does a review. He gives it a rating. He gives it a review and a rating, and so that way you kind of see what he thinks about it as well. But like I said, I think it's one of the better, if not the best, training aid out there. But full disclosure, we do get a kickback from Divot Board. But the reality is that we could get a kickback on every single training aid out there if we wanted to. But the reality is that we don't think they're all good. We only tell you about the ones that we think are good. So PRGR, Divot Board, and so on and so forth. We actually are releasing a video today about the Precision Impact. Clay likes that Precision Impact. I haven't played around with it much, but he says he's played around with it some, and he likes it. He thinks it could be helpful. So be on the lookout in your email later today for an opportunity to watch the video where Clay talks about that. All right, so let's keep going here. So Tom S. had another question. Says, Q, can you show the correct hand path for swing coming from the inside? At last parallel, my club is oriented along the target line, and I tend to pull the ball to the left. So hand path and club path are two different things. The best way to kind of see where your hand path is to use the elbow plane line. So the elbow plane line is a line that you draw from the hosel of the club up through your elbow at address. And you want to get those hands on that elbow plane line by the time you're about waist level, right? So the best way to kind of get that. And then what's really, really important for drawing that elbow plane line is the camera angle. Because, you know, when you're looking at something on video, you know, you're looking at something in 2D that's 3D, right? So if you have the camera oriented in a different, you know, the wrong perspective, the wrong camera angle, it's not going to show you what you want to see. So you want to make sure that you're set up down the toe line. The easiest way to do that is to take a club or alignment stick and place it on the ground, pointed at a target. So I'd have this lined up with the target out in the distance. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my camera, you know, my phone, whatever I'm using, and I'm going to set this up to be shooting right down this. So you can see here, this camera here is set up to go right down, straight down that. So when you're looking on video, you should see that club or alignment stick straight up and down vertical like you're seeing it here. Now, the other thing we want to make sure that we're doing is we have it at about pocket level. This camera angle is actually too high. This is about eye level. So we want to get that down to about pocket level. And then the other thing that you want to make sure you do is that you get it far away enough to where you and the club never leave the frame. So this is actually too close as well. You know, I would want to get this to be a little bit further away so that way my club stays in the frame as I'm going back. So when you go to set up to the ball, you want to make sure that you have your toes up close to that stick. So that way the camera angle is going down the toe line. You don't want it like this, right? Where it's too far in between. I would say if you're within a club head width with your toes from that line or from that stick on the ground, and you have that camera set up correctly, I would say you'll be in good shape. But like I said, you want to have the toes within a club head width and equidistant. We don't want to have, you know, 1 foot like this and 1 foot like this, you know, and vice versa. I want to have the toes right up on that. And then when you look at it on video, use some sort of software, an app like V1 Golf would be good. Use V1 Golf, and at address, draw a line from the hosel of the club up through your elbow here, and that's going to be what we refer to as the elbow plane line. And when we're coming down in the downswing, by lead arm parallel, we want to see those hands moving toward the elbow plane line, right? So if you get up to the top and your hands are moving along with the elbow plane line, right, or you know, they're not working toward it, then what's going to tend to happen is your hands are going to be above, and that club's going to be working out to in, and there's where the pulls are going to come from, right? So we want to get those hands working toward the elbow plane line. They don't have to be on the elbow plane line by lead arm parallel, but they need to be working toward the elbow plane line. And then by the time we get to waist level, right? So here I'm at waist level, my hands have got to be on that elbow plane line. If they're out here, then I'm going to tend to come over the top, right? So I got to get those hands on the elbow plane line. And then I want to have that club slightly inside my hand, so slightly under the elbow plane line. So that way, when I continue to turn through impact, my hands are gonna move to the left, and the club's gonna be able to kick out. You see, if I have this club outside my hands here, then when my hands move around my body, right, that's gonna bring the club to the left. It's gonna exit left too soon. Right. So we need that club to be exiting left later. And to have that happen, the club has to be inside the hands here when you're getting to this point in the swing. So when I say inside the hands, if you drew a vertical line on my hands, it would be on that side of that line, on the inside toward me. Outside would be away from me. Right. So if I'm here, and what we have to realize that our hands are working around our body. Right. So my hands are working. By the time they're getting in front of my trail thigh here, when you're looking from the face-on view, they're starting to turn the corner and work to the left, right, for a right-handed golfer. So if I have this club, if I'm coming here and I have this club parallel to the ground, and that club's outside my hands, I'm not going to be able to move my hands naturally the way they want to around my body without pulling that club to the left. So I need to have that in here. So that way, when my hands work to the left, my club can work out to the right to the ball, and I can swing on plane nicely. So we have to have that club underneath the elbow plane. So that's what I would be looking at. Things to help you do that would be the move, right? That would be one thing that could help you do that. Another thing that could help you do that would be the Never Slice Again course. That would be another one that could help you to get that working a little bit better. Your stable fluid spine would be a big one if your spine angles are off. If you're not angled away and then angled away at the top, you're going to tend to get the hands. If I'm leaning toward the target at the top of the swing, my hands are going to tend to want to go out away from me in the start of the downswing and have a wrong hand path, right? So there's lots of paths that you can have with your hands. You can be more vertical, you can be more flat, but I would say that if you draw that elbow plane line, that's going to be the reference that's going to apply to pretty much everybody. Right? If you look at the elbow plane line, you want to see the hands working toward the elbow plane line from the top to lead arm parallel. They can be on the elbow plane line at that point, but they need to at least be working toward it. So if you look at Bubba Watson's swing, Bubba Watson's got a very upright swing. When he comes down to lead arm parallel, his hands aren't going to be on that elbow plane line because he just doesn't have a way to get them there, but they're working toward it. And then by the time he gets to waist level, he's on it. If you look at someone who's flatter, right? Someone who has a flatter swing, maybe someone that's more in this area, right? That would be maybe like a Matt Kuchar, for example. Matt Kuchar, he's almost on that elbow plane line. And then by the time he's lead on parallel, he's on it and then he stays on it. So depending on how flat your swing is or how upright your swing is, that's what you're going to see there. But I would say in both scenarios, by the time you're close to waist level, you got to have those hands on that elbow plane line. Otherwise, you're going to tend to struggle with pulls and over the tops and things like that. So, like I said, I'd look at the move. I'd make sure your spine angles are good. I'd look at the Never Slice Again course to get you to be have that proper elbow plane line. So Glenn M says, Clay's been writing, of all the things you could work on, there are only 5 that truly matter. What are the 5? And is there a video where he discusses these? The 5 is the top speed golf system. That's what the top speed golf system is. So these are the 5 things that we see all the better players do. So number 1 is a stable fluid spine. So that's where we want to have a little bit of tilt with the spine at address. As we go up to the top, we want to be nice and stable and retain that tilt as we go up to the top. So what that means is we don't want to be going like this. We don't want to be going like this. We don't want to slide the hips and go like this or kind of have a reverse weight shift, reverse pivot, something like that. It's going to tend to lead to inconsistencies. No tour players really do that. So we want to be nice and stable. And then as we come into impact, we want to get a little bit more angled away as we're coming in to impact to allow us to release that club out in front and be in a good position. So that's number one. Number two is a power turn. So all tour players, even the tour players that have short swings like John Rahm and Tony Finau, they still get a good shoulder turn. It's not like they're swinging the club like this. They're turning their shoulders. They're just not turning their shoulders as much as you see, some other players like Dustin Johnson, right? Dustin Johnson gets like 130-degree shoulder turn. What we're telling you is you need to get at least 90 to be able to have sufficient power. So that's the power turn course, getting that good turn back, and then also get that good turn through the ball as well. The third thing is a lag. So you don't see any tour players that cast the club from the start. They're all getting some lag in the start of the downswing. So that's a course to help you with that. The fourth piece is the compression line course. So that the compression line is the line that goes from our lead ankle, lead hip, lead shoulder. At impact, we want that to be in a nice straight line. And we want that to be just barely angled away from the target. Depending on your release pattern, you may need to be more angled away or more vertical. If you have a much later release, you can afford to be more angled away. If you have an early release, you're going to want to be more on the vertical side. Unless you're hitting driver, you can afford to be more angled away. But generally, we want to have that pretty much straight up and down and nice in a straight line. We don't want to have the hips bumped out like this, right? Because then the hips are going to lock up. We're not going to be able to open up the body and turn through, right? So, and we don't want to be super angled away coming in like this. We're going to tend to hit chunk shots, right? We don't want to be too far toward the target typically, because then we're going to tend to chop down on the ball too much. So that's the fourth piece. The last piece is a straight line release. This is when we're talking about the straight line release, we're talking about where this club is splitting my forearms, right? So if I'm coming into contact here I am at impact, and then I release the club. Well, that's where the club's splitting my forearms. When I look at most amateur players, I'm seeing that release is happening very early. It's happening maybe, here's impact, and then the club releases just shortly after that. When we look at better players, tour players, what we're seeing is that club releases out in front, close to degrees where that club's splitting the forearms. So that's the 5 pieces of the tough. Throw the move in there as well as kind of the 6th piece. But that's what the Top Speed Golf system is. So if you want to check out the Top Speed Golf system, click the instruction tab. Then at the top of the page there, then click the Top Speed Golf system, and you'll see all the pieces that I'm talking about there. But that's what Clay's talking about with what you're reading there in his writing. So Lee D says, after a 5-year hiatus, I am back to playing golf. I've adopted the TSG system in order to rebuild my swing. I've been out at the range course 3 or 4 times per week consistently over the past 3 months. I've noticed some soreness in my fingers that I've never felt before. I'm not looking for a medical diagnosis, just wondering if I could be gripping the club too tightly and or doing something else in my swing that is contributing to the soreness. It's in the ring, pinky, fingers on both hands. Thanks for all the great advice, as always. So it's really impossible for me to say, Lee, I wish I could help you, but there's no way for me to know if you're gripping the club too tightly. One thing you can do is grip the club lighter and see if that helps. There wouldn't necessarily be anything that you're doing wrong in your swing that's doing that. If you're practicing 3 or 4 times a week, that's a lot of time. That's quite a bit of time. So, if you do anything for a long time, things are going to get sore. If you imagine if I stood here and waved at you for an hour, my wrist is probably going to get pretty sore. It doesn't mean that I'm waving at you wrong. It just means that I'm sat here and did this so many times that eventually I'm just going to get sore. So that's more than likely what's going on. Is just that you just put, you haven't played golf for 5 years, and now you're getting back into it, and you're kind of coming on pretty strong with it. Getting out there 3 or 4 times a week on the range and the course, that's quite a bit. I don't play that much anymore. I'm lucky. I'm just busy. I'm lucky if I get out there to play once a week. I imagine if I was playing four times a week, these days I myself would probably be pretty sore from doing that. Not necessarily in my fingers, but maybe other areas would be sore just because I'm not used to it. When I was younger, I played 36 holes a day without even thinking about it, and was never tired or sore or anything. I was used to it. Obviously I was younger, but I was used to it. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's something wrong you're doing with your swing, but I would say you could try feeling like you're a little bit looser in the hands with the grips. That could be part of it, but I would imagine it's more of just the repetition that's causing the soreness. And obviously, if it's something that is persistent, I would recommend maybe seeing a medical professional. It could be, maybe you take a few days off and then the soreness goes away, right? And then you realize, okay, well, it's because of the repetition and things like that. All right, so Bill S says, question lag. On video, I have a good lag angle at arms parallel on downswing, but I seem to be spending that lag early. As at club parallel, my hands are behind my trail leg instead of front of my trail leg. Appreciate suggestions for drills to improve. So, you need to work toward the straight line release course. That's what the straight line release course. So once you get some good lag, then you work on getting that lag to release properly out in front. As far as the root cause for me to know, I would need to see your swing to know for sure what's going on there. But what I would recommend if you're not looking to work with an instructor or something like that, is to work toward that straight line release course, because that's where it gets you to release that lag properly out in front. So I'd make sure your compression line is good first, that you're good to go, because if the compression line is off, your swing can stall out, and you're gonna have a hard time releasing that club out in front. So I just keep working toward that straight line release course. Now, if you want to get down to the bottom of it and figure out exactly what's going on and tell you exactly what you need to do to get the club releasing out in front, cut to the chase for the most part, instead of kind of working through our drills and our system, then I would recommend working with an instructor through something like our unlimited swing review program. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's an awesome program where you will have the ability to send videos of your swing to an instructor such as myself, and then get a video lesson back, personalized exactly for you, what you need to do to get what you want out of your swing. So if you want to check that out, you can click the get a review link at the top of the page. If you have any questions about limited swing reviews, feel free to ask here in the office hours. I don't know if I have any spots available at the moment. Let me check and see if anybody has any spots. The spots are limited. There is a high demand for swing reviews, so we don't always have spots available. But let me go ahead and check here to see. So currently, I don't have any spots available. It looks like everyone is booked up at the moment. So what I would say is, what I would recommend doing is join a waiting list for the instructor you'd like to work with, and then whenever we open up spots, which we try to open up spots as much as we can. It just depends on, when people cancel, things like that. Because some people, will do the swing reviews for a few months and then cancel, and so on and so forth. So it just depends on if that happens, if we can open up spots again, because we just have a limited number of people that we can work with. So, but join the waiting list, so that way you can get notified whenever spots become available, and then you can join at that time. All right, so Michael H says, in the straight line release at impact, I find my right elbow still tucked, attached to the body, and slightly bowed. Clay's videos show that his right arm is straight and is separated from his body. I know it sounds like it should be simple to resolve, but any tips? That's not something I would worry about, to be honest. Everyone's release pattern can be a little bit different. It's fine to have the arm kind of working out away from the body like this. It's also fine to have the release where your arm's more close to your body as you're coming through as well. So what we have to understand is that everything we do with our technique has to improve what's going on at impact, right? So that's what you have to think about. How is that going to help your impact? If you look at something, with somebody's right arm, and you're not doing that exact same thing, that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It just means it's just something that you do different. So as long as you're releasing that club out in front and you're getting that club to release out in front, then I would say you're in good shape, right? That's the thing that matters, is how the club is working through there. If your arm is got some bend in it when you're coming into after impact, that's completely fine. Look at Lee Westwood, look at Jordan Spieth, look at Brooks Koepka. They all have bend in their arms, so it's not. I wouldn't say it's something that's necessarily bad. All right, so keep the questions coming. Looks like we ran out of questions here, unless may need to refresh this again. Refresh it, see if there's any new questions in there. All right, so it doesn't look like any new questions as of yet. So if you got your questions, go ahead and post them in there. And then we will get them answered. In the meantime, I will just be kind of just checking some emails and stuff then. So Glenn M says, how do you figure out which sequence to follow in the TSG system? So here's how I'd recommend working through the TSG system. The first piece is a stable fluid spine. So it's listed in order on that page that I gave you, Glenn. So if you click the instruction tab, then the Tasman Golf system, that's listed in the order in which you should work through it. So stable fluid spine, power turn, lag, compression line, straight line release, then the move if you want to kind of go for bonus after that. Now, the way that I would work through it is I would video your swing from face on down line, so that way you kind of get an understanding of what your swing looks like. And then I would watch the first video of every piece of the system. So I watched the stable fluid spine first video, then the power turn, and each one of them. And I kind of look at your swing and see, okay, where is my swing? Where's my swing with the stable fluid spine? All right. Well, if my stable fluid spine looks good, then let me look at my power turn. Let me see what's going on with the power turn. If my power turn looks good, then I'm going to look at the top speed lag course, right? Because odds are you're probably doing some of the pieces of the system pretty well already. So it doesn't really make sense for you to work through that piece if it already looks good, right? So, but I would look, okay, am I fitting? And we tell you exactly what to look for, what to measure and things like that when you're looking at it on video. So I would kind of watch the video, see where you are with it, right? So when we talk about our stable fluid spine, we want to be 6 to 8 degrees angled away at a duress, right? And at the top, we want to remain in that angled away position. That as we come into impact, we want to be, in that 18 to 25 degree angled away position as we're coming into impact. So if you look at your swing and you're not seeing that, then hey, you need to go to the stable fluid spine and start working through the drills, right? What a big mistake that I see a lot of people make is they'll kind of pass over a lot of the pieces of the system because, I don't know why, but they just do. They'll just pass over it. I think it's because, maybe there's certain things that stand out more in their swing. So I would say it's at least 80% of golfers, the amateur golfers that, I work with, are releasing the club early. So what I see a lot of people do is they'll go to the straight line release course and they'll start working on that, even though their spine isn't where it should be. They're not getting lag, or something like that. So that's I wouldn't highly recommend doing that because everything kind of builds on each other. So if your spine isn't good, it's going to be really, really difficult to release that club out in front. If you're not getting any lag in the swing, you're casting the club to start, you're basically already releasing it from the very top of the swing. You're going to have a hard time releasing it later, right? I know that the release may be the thing that stands out the most in your swing. That's the easiest. It's the easiest thing to kind of catch. But I strongly urge you to work through all the pieces leading up to that before you do that, because the straight line release is the last piece of the system, because all those things build in on each other to get there. So that's how I would work through it. And if you look at your stable foot spine, it looks great, then you don't need to work on it. If you look at your power turn and you see you're already getting a huge turn, you're already like this at the top of the swing, then you don't really, you may want to work on it a little bit, just see if you can get a little bit more. But I would say it's not a requirement that you have to, right? So, but if you're casting the club, right, you look at your swing and you're doing this, you best work on the lag course before you work on the straight line release course. So that's the way that I would recommend working through it. All right, so good. We got some more questions in here. Trevor S says, Clay gave example of swing club to punch hole in a wall. Gave me a good impression of lag and release and right elbow below left arm. Tell me what the club feels like in the release move. Hope this makes sense. I'm not familiar with what Clay is talking about there, so I apologize. I'm not going to be able to give you that. And I also can't tell you what it feels like either, because feel is relative. So there's no way for me to tell you how it's going to feel for you. Everyone's going to feel a little bit different with what the release is. So, for example, I would say if you're someone that releases the club early, you're probably going to need to feel like, at least in the beginning, you're probably going to need to feel like the club's not releasing at all, right? So what that means is if you're someone who's coming into impact, right, and you go like this and you flip, right, you get that early release, you probably need to feel like you're coming into impact and the club doesn't release at all. It's going to feel like you're doing that. But the reality is they'll probably be more like a release that's out in front instead of the really flippy release. So what a lot of what golf is, just getting better at golf, is adjusting your feel to get the desired result, right? Everyone's feel is different. So everyone's going to need to make a different adjustment. So I can't tell you what the release is going to feel like to you, because I'm not you. And if I tell you what it feels like to me, that's probably not going to help you, because you're not me, right? So we have to adjust our feel to get the desired result that we want. So what I would do is I'd look at your swing on video, see what's actually happening, right? If I'm releasing this club early and it feels like I'm releasing it out in front, then what I would do is I would try to exaggerate the feeling of no release at all as much as possible to get the club to actually release out in front. And then if you actually look at your swing and it looks like this, then I would adjust your feel again. Be like, okay, well, feeling like I don't release the club at all makes it so I don't release it very much. So I want to just feel like I just release it a little bit later. So instead of feeling no release, maybe I just feel it releases, but really, really late, like way, instead of releasing there, I may feel like it releases more like 90 degrees out in front, right? So it's adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. So hopefully that makes sense with what you got to do. So Mark A says, can you discuss where your weight should be distributed during the swing? Heels, midfoot, toes. It feels like I want to be heel centric. Thoughts? So yeah, when you're in the address position here, you're going to be pretty much flat-footed for the most part. It's going to be more on the arches of the feet, pretty evenly distributed. Some players do get in the toes a little bit or in the heels. It's really personal preference, but for the most part, you're going to be pretty balanced at address. Now, as you go up to the top, you're going to start driving in that heel, that trail heel, as you go up to the top, right? And then as you start the downswing, you're going to move a little bit into the balls of your feet. And then as we get later on in the downswing, you're driving in the heel, right? So it's balls of the feet in the beginning of the backswing, balls of the trail foot, and then driving in that heel, and then I'm going into the balls of the lead foot, and then I'm driving in the heel as I'm coming through, impacting into the full finish. So Trevor S says, by the way, got a SC200 per the course instruction, and it made a big difference. First, I thought it was broken at 57 miles per hour. Then working with a monitor, got up to 85 miles per hour. Still working at 72. Should be able to get near 100. So SC200, they actually don't make those anymore. They have the SC200 Plus, but it didn't do well in our testing. So hopefully you got the regular SC200 that they don't make anymore. So that's why we kind of promote the PRGR now, because one, it's a little bit cheaper, and two, we think it works just as good, if not better, than the SC200. So that's what this guy is right here, the PRGR. So if you're interested in the PRGR, I can actually put a link for that as well. They are back in stock. They were out of stock for quite a while with the company that sells them, that we have the affiliate with. But now they're back in stock. So if you want to check them out, see how it stacks up with the with our flight scope, you can check that out. But yeah, the SC200, the original one, did really well in our testing as well. But fortunately, they just don't make those anymore. But anyway, can you get to 100? Is it possible? Yes. If you're at 85 miles per hour right now and you've already gained a fair amount, you're got a long road ahead of you. You get to 100. So typically, the first 10 miles per hour is the easiest to get. Then every mile per hour after that gets more difficult. 10 miles per hour. That's why I would say it should be if you've never done speed training before, then I would say 10 miles per hour. There's a really good chance that you're going to get at least 10 miles per hour. Really, really good chance. But beyond that, it just gets more difficult. So I don't know what your starting speed was. You said you got up to 85 miles per hour. But if you were at 85 miles per hour as your starting speed, and you've never done speed training before, and you want to get up to 100, I would say it's possible. But I would say that you have a much better chance of getting to 95 than 100. So it's just that every mile per hour after F10 is just more difficult. It's like the same thing as if you're a 25 handicapper, it's much easier to drop 10 strokes off your handicap than it would be for a 10 handicapper to drop 10 strokes off their handicap. It's like the faster you get, the harder it is to gain speed. So like I said, the first 10 miles per hour are the easiest to get. Then after that, it gets harder. So myself, I've done the speed training. I started at 110 miles per hour, and then I got up to 123 miles per hour. And that was my fastest for a while. And I kept working. I got up to 124, and I kept working, got up to 125, kept working. It basically took me a year. In 3 weeks, I went from, or like a month, I went from 110 to 123 being my high, but then it took me almost a year to go from 123 to 129. So now, granted, I wasn't training. I would have been faster probably had I been doing the speed training. I wasn't doing the speed training as much after that first month. So I probably would have got it, maybe in 4 or 5 months up to 129. But it takes, it just takes a lot more repetition to do that. So keep that in mind. Is it possible? Yes, I absolutely think that it's possible. But you're going to have to stick with it and understand that first 10 miles per hour is the easiest. Every mile per hour after that is going to require some work. All right, so Michael H says, Clay mentions that when covering the ball at impact, shoulders should be parallel to the target line. I find that my shoulders are slightly past parallel and open. suggestion is to keep the shoulders from rotating too far. It's okay to have the shoulders a little bit open. We look at tour players. The hips are typically going to be somewhere in the 40 to 50 degrees open range. And then the shoulders are going to be somewhere in the 10 to 15 degrees open range on average. Now, there are some players that have the shoulders square, and there are some players that have the shoulders more than 15 degrees open. But generally, the average is going to be around 10 to 15 degrees open. What we also have to understand is that the chest is more open. The chest is going to be somewhere 20 to 30 degrees open at impact. So the shoulders aren't as open because our shoulders can move independently of our chest, right? So I can actually protract my lead shoulder and retract my trail shoulder. I'm going to keep my chest pointing straight forward here, right? And if I protract and retract, so that's moving my shoulder blade away from the spine to protract and toward the spine to retract. If I do that, you can see my shoulders are closed here, right? My shoulders are closed, but my actual chest, my sternum, is still pointing straight that way. I have not turned my sternum at all. So that's what's happening when we come into impact, is that our lead shoulder is protracted, our chest is open, is more open, right? And our hips should be open coming into impact, and it'll look something like that. So it's okay for your shoulders to be a little bit open, as long if you're not coming over the top, right? As long as you're not coming over the top, because the more we open the shoulders, the harder it is going to be to get the club to shallow out, right? So a lot of it depends on your flexibility. If you have the flexibility to really have the chest really open and also have that club really laying off. So someone like Rory McIlroy. Rory McIlroy is very flexible. He actually has. I've seen video of him with his chest and shoulders way open at impact, like 45 degrees open with the shoulders, and that club is still coming down on plane. But depending on who you are, that may be very difficult. I know I personally would not be able to have my chest and shoulders that open without coming over the top. If I had this is as much as I can get my club behind me. If I had my chest that open, I would for sure be coming over the top. I would have a really hard time. So yeah, I would just try to feel like you're more closed off if that is the case. If you are getting, but if you're getting that club to come down nicely on plane, then you can be as open as you want. Really, that it's actually going to benefit you to be more open as long as that club's working down on plane, because that's going to make it easier to release that club out in front and be able to get shaft lean. All right, so keep the questions coming here. We got about 10 minutes left. If you got any more questions, go ahead and post them. So Dean B says, how can I set up for draw with a driver? So if you're trying to set up with a draw, there's lots of ways to do it, but the way that I like to do it is I like to set up with my body a little bit more closed off, right? So what that means is I'm just going to kind of drop this trail foot back a little bit, and that just makes it easier for me to kind of to get that club to swing from the inside, right? So that's number one. And then the other thing that I do is I just strengthen the grip a little bit. And by that, I mean, have your thumbs a little bit more. So this would be kind of weak grip where my thumbs are on top. And then I'd want to have my thumbs more on the side of the grip. And what that does is that makes it a lot easier to get that club face closed when you're coming into contact. Because that's what I need. I need this club swinging from the inside a little bit. And then I need my face to be closed to that path. So what I'll do is I'll set up. I'll drop this foot back a little bit to help me swing more from the inside. I will strengthen my grip a little bit to help me to get that club face more closed. and then I'll just swing along my feet here with that closed face, and that's going to get me to draw. So I recommend going to the range and kind of practicing this, but that's what you want to do. So a way you can practice it is get your alignment stick out, point it at your target out in the distance. All right, so get your alignment stick out, point it at your target out in the distance. Set up to it with your feet up, square up to it, and then drop that foot back a little bit. Close that face down by strengthening the grip, and then just swing along your feet. So you see I dropped my foot a little bit back. I'm going to swing along my feet from the inside. I'm going to imagine my hands kind of rolling over and closing the face as I'm coming through. All right, to allow me to get that nice draw going. And then the other thing I would say is I'd favor the toe of the club a little bit. If you're finding you're hitting it in the heel, that can negate a draw, because when you hit it off the heel, something called gear effect can happen. And what will happen is the ball will tend to start more to the left, and it will tend to either fade more or draw less due to that gear effect, right? So I would try to favor that toe a little bit, because then that gives the opposite effect. The ball will start a little bit more to the right than it normally would. Then it will tend to draw more or fade less. Now, we don't want to get too much toward the toe, because then, the face will twist too much. You won't transfer as much energy to the golf ball. The golf ball won't go as far. When I'm saying favor the toe, I'm talking like a 1/4 inch toward the toe, ideally. If you went a 1/2 inch toward the toe, that wouldn't be so bad either. But if you get in the heel, it's gonna be more difficult to get the ball to draw. So if you're hitting it in the heel, then I would try to favor the toe a little bit. So Mark B says, why does an outside in path seem more powerful than an inside out path? It's not by itself, but what happens is when you swing from the inside, you have to have the face more closed when you're coming into the ball in order for the ball to go on target. Because otherwise, if the face is open, the ball will go way to the right. So when you close the face a little bit, it actually de-lofts the face, which makes it more powerful. It's the opposite effect for an inside-out path. If you swing out to in, you have to have the face a little open. Otherwise, you're going to hit a pull or a pull hook. That pull or pull hook will be powerful, but it's going to be way away from your target, right? So if you get the face, if you open the face, right, that adds loft and it's less powerful. So that's why draws are typically more powerful, because it requires you to close the face a little bit, which de-lofts the club, which adds some power. So Dean B says, do you close the hips and shoulders as well? Yes, I would kind of get your body lined up, everything. So what I wouldn't do is just drop your foot back and then have everything opened up like this, because then you're just gonna tend to swing like that. So yeah, you're gonna be dropping that foot back, and it's dropping your whole body back. So if I'm set up like this is straight toward my target. I'm dropping that foot back, and my hips are kind of closing off, my chest is closing off, my shoulder, everything's kind of closing off the target, but it's going to be in line with my toe line there, right? And that's going to help me to swing from the inside. And now I want to make sure I get that club face closed as I'm coming in, so that way I can hit that draw. So Larry H says, I used to come over the top a lot. I've corrected it by keeping my arms closer to my body, but in doing that, I've lost distance. When I try to get my hands higher in the backswing, I tend to start pulling the ball again. Can you demonstrate how to get the hands higher in the backswing and still swing from inside out? Yeah, you just need to feel those hands going more behind you, right? So when you go to the top, instead of feeling your hands go out away from you, you need to feel like those hands are going more behind you. So one thing I would look at in your swing is to make sure that your spine angle is angled away at the top. When you get to where you're kind of like this at the top, your hands, even if you get them up high, they're gonna tend to want to go out that way. It's gonna be really, really difficult to get the hands to kind of work back behind you and the club to work back behind you to swing from the inside. So I'd make sure that you get that spine angle away, get nice angled away at the top. So that way you have those high hands, but now you have that space to drop those hands and that club in from the inside. And one thing I would recommend doing is, you can use something like an impact bag or something like that. A drill that I really like for creating an inside out path is, if you imagine here is your ball, right? Here's your target line. The stick is the target line. What you can do, this isn't a, if the ball will stay, doesn't want to stay. But if you imagine this is an impact bag, let's not use that because it's not going to stay. But basically what I would do is I place an impact bag, a foot and a half or so in front of and then in line with your target line. And when you do that, I have to swing this club from the inside, right, to miss that impact bag. Because otherwise, if I swing over the top, I'm going to hit that impact bag. So that's what I would imagine here as I'm going up the top. I got high hands. I got to get my body angled away, right? I got to get my chest kind of pointed off this way. So that way I can swing this club from the inside and miss that impact bag, right? And that's going to allow me to get my hands high, get my good distance, and also swing from the inside and not come over the top, right? So you got to find that happy medium as well. The higher your hands are, the harder it's going to be to swing the club from the inside, right? So if you're really having trouble swinging that club from the inside, you may want to look at not getting the hands as high, so that way you can swing from the inside more easily. Kind of find that happy medium that works the best for you. So DB says, Q, last one quick. I can free swing my driver at 117, 120, but when the ball is there on the tee, it drops to 110-ish. Any tips for hitting at full speed? That's pretty normal. Most people are going to have a different swing with and without the ball. So that's fairly normal to have a difference there. I'm weird. I don't know why. I actually swing faster with the ball versus without a ball. But most people are in your situation where without a ball, they swing faster than with the ball. One thing you can do is compare the swings. Look at your swing without the ball and look at your swing with the ball and see what the big difference is there. One thing I would say is that a lot of times when people swing without the ball, they're swinging, nowhere near where the golf ball would be, right? They would miss the golf ball if it was there. So I would try when you're swinging, taking the dry swings without the ball, I'd maybe have a tee there that you can clip or, something there. So that way it's actually it's more comparable because you're actually hitting through the same impact zone. The thing is, like when you're swinging without the ball, you're just swinging, right? You're not swinging with the intention to hit the ball. When you add the ball there, you're trying to hit the ball. You're not only trying to swing hard, but you're trying to hit the ball in the center of the face. You're trying to square up the face. You're trying to do certain things in your swing so that way the result is good. And those compensations can be causing you to swing slower. So I would compare the swings. I'd make sure that your dry swings are kind of actually going through the impact zone. Clip a tee, and then compare the swings, see what the differences are. Maybe for some reason with the ball there, you don't get as big a turn, and then when you take away the ball, you get a bigger turn. A lot of times I see people take practice swings. I'm not saying that this is what you're doing, Dean, but it's just something that I see every now and then. Well, somebody will tell me something very similar to what you're saying, and then I'll look at their practice swing, and they're like this. Well, no wonder. You're not even looking at the golf ball. Well, you're not going to do that when the ball is there, right? So you're doing something very different, and you may not even realize that you're doing that. Right, when you're looking at it. So take a look at the video, compare, use a app like V1 Golf or something like that. It's a free app. If you go, it's available for Android and iPhone. There's other swing analysis apps out there as well. That's just the one that we use for swing reviews. So it's the one I'm familiar with. So that's what I would recommend doing. Take a look at it, compare the two, see what the differences are, and then it can kind of turn you on. Look at, well, I'm doing this without the ball, and I'm not doing this with the ball. So let me try to really focus on doing that. Maybe it's a bigger shoulder turn, maybe it's lag. Maybe it could be a lot of things, right? So that's what I would be looking at. And the other thing that it could be is that when people have the ball there, they have a hard time getting out of their comfort zone and just swinging hard with it there and not worrying about the result, right? When you're swinging without the ball, there's no, that worry is not there, right? You're just swinging as hard as you can, just swinging. But when the ball is there, that people, a lot of times I found that's just through the distance clinics and things like that, that they'll have trouble, getting, letting it go and not worrying about the result so much in terms of the ball flight, but more worry. We need to be more paying attention to the result in terms of the club head speed, because when you're speed training, it's not that important where the golf ball goes. Now, I'm not going to say it's unimportant completely. We would like to see the ball go dead straight and things like that. But when we're speed training, it's not about that. When you watch the long drive competitions, right, they're not hitting every single one in the grid, right? A lot of them are way off, and they're giving it everything they got. So that's kind of what you want to do with yours as well. Get everything you got. And if you notice that there's a tendency, like, hey, when I'm slicing everything, then you could maybe try to swing as hard as you can, and then try to draw one when you're swinging as hard as you can, and see if that helps. So just some suggestions there. But we're afternoon now, so thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Wednesday, and Wednesday will be 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time.